that will cook.
Hello friends, welcome back. I'm excited to bring you part 2 of my 2-part video series on the highly anticipated but rarely sought after Rueben Ravioli. In case you missed part 1, you can check it out here. Ado further without, let's started. We'll start with the dough. Pasta dough is real easy to make. All you need is 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1 cup of semolina flour, 3 freshly cracked eggs, a few healthy glugs of olive oil, and then just blend it together until it comes together into a glutinous, sticky dough. And here is where I might lose some authenticity points among some of the more militant hipsters for using the blender method instead of making the dough nonna style. But, you know, that's just a risk that I'm gonna have to take. I mean, I've got pasta to eat here. I don't have the time to develop repetitive stress injuries for the sake of visual aesthetics. Once your dough has come together, turn it out onto your work surface and give it a little dusting with some flour to prevent it from sticking to your hands as you knead it to further the gluten development. The reason you do this is so you get a more elastic, less sticky, Play-Doh-like texture. Then once you're done that, wrap it up with some plastic wrap, airtight, and let it rest so it can fully hydrate. So while your pasta dough is resting, you can use this time to make the filling for the raviolis. Take the half a cabbage that's been sitting in your fridge for a few weeks now, and marvel at the innate resilience of the mighty cabbage. And then slice it up into little tiny pieces. The amount of butter that you'll need for this recipe will subtract roughly a minute off of the end of your life. So once you've adjusted your death clock to account for this Faustian bargain, then just toss in your chopped cabbage and sear on a high heat until you develop some nice charred flavor. Some of the more observant viewers may have noticed that I actually burnt some of the cabbage. I admit it, I did it. I walked away from the pan while it was on a high heat. Classic mistake. Like taking an extra tab of acid because the 2 you took an hour ago haven't kicked in yet and you thought they were duds. Once your cabbage is cooked to your liking, transfer it from the pan onto a plate to cool. Then playfully toss in 1, 2, 3, 4 more minutes worth of butter. As your life force dissolves before your very eyes, dice a few onions by making thin slices lengthwise and then widthwise. And then add them to your pan. At first, you'll notice the onions are going to shrink quite a lot as the heat causes them to lose their moisture. After this initial stage, the sugars in the onions will start to caramelize on the surface of the pan. This beautiful substance is known as fond, and you can think of it as a layer of intensified flavor of whatever it is that you happen to be cooking. You can then use the moisture still present in the onions to deglaze the pan. And then you can repeat this process until the onions are fully caramelized and have a lot less moisture in them, at which point, if you want to deglaze the pan further, you'll have to use another liquid. Then peel a handful of garlic cloves. Make sure to keep them whole because since we're going to be grating the garlic into the onion mixture, it's much easier to grate a whole clove than one that's been crushed. And now it's time to make the mayonnaise. If you want to feel fancy and call it aioli,
feel free to do so.
You want to start by separating an egg yolk from the whites. Just pass the yolk between the eggshells until most of the rooster cum is gone. Then add in a dollop of Dijon mustard. Squeeze in a bit of lemon juice using your outstretched hand as a filter to catch any seeds that haven't been GMO'd out of the lemon yet. And then grate in 1 or 2 small garlic cloves. Add some freshly cracked black pepper, a pinch of cayenne to give it a little zing-zong-zang, and finally, season with a dash of salt. Once more, modern technology comes to our aid. Sorry, Nonna. Whisk your mixture and then slowly drizzle in a steady stream of neutral oil. I'm using peanut oil, until you get a thick and creamy emulsion. Now it's time to make the Russian dressing. Using your knife skills to fancily, if not redundantly, dice a few pickles, and then into a bowl you want to put in your homemade mayo, and then put in about half that amount of ketchup. Now, I'd like to take a brief moment to announce once and for all the solving of one of history's greatest and most elusive mysteries. How to pronounce this sauce. It's pronounced Worcester. as in you were Chester, but had to have your name legally changed because people kept confusing you with a formerly unpronounceable sauce. Add in a few authoritative shakes of your Worcester sauce, and then put in your pickles. Stir to combine. Anyway, now simply combine all your ingredients into a stuffing for the ravioli. I eyeballed everything and just tasted as I went, using the Reuben sandwich as a guide for the proportions of ingredients to use. Once your pasta dough has rested, sprinkle on some flour and flatten it using the heavy marble rolling pin you found on the curb while walking through a rich neighborhood. Then feed it through a pasta rolling machine, adjusting the flattening mechanism every 2 or 3 passes. You'll find yourself performing a de facto balancing act, alternating between holding the sheet of dough with your outstretched fingers, feeding the machine, all the while yanking the crank with your other hand, then without interrupting the flow of dough, fitting your hand under the rollers to pull out the dough so that it doesn't jam up on itself. As you continue this process, the dough will become stretched thin, and therefore more delicate, sensitive, and ultimately frail. Treat the dough as you would a person who fits this description. You want to enable these tendencies so that they become fixed properties which define their character. You can then effectively exploit this frailty to easily mold them, allowing you to fill them up with whatever you choose. Roll out little ping-pong-sized balls of your stuffing and place them in the center of your dough discs. Then pinch together the opposing sides of dough over top of the ball of stuffing. Continue this along each side, making sure no air is left inside of the raviolis. Then sprinkle some more flour over a plate to keep the dough from sticking. Bring some lightly salted water to a boil, drop in your raviolis, and stir to prevent them from sticking. Cook them for a very short time, less than a minute. This is because fresh pasta takes way less time to cook than hard dried pasta does. It's also going to finish cooking in the pan, so we don't want to risk overcooking and getting mushy pasta. We want a nice al dente, toothsome pasta. For the finishing touch, brown some butter by heating it in a sauté pan until the milk fats caramelize and give off a nutty, Christmassy, hunger-inducing aroma. And then drop in your cooked raviolis into the pan, along with a splash of the starchy pasta water, and stir vigorously. This will create a creamy emulsion that will coat our raviolis with a velvety, life-affirming sauce. Then plate it up however you want. I put a nice glob of sour cream in the center, along with some aesthetic driblets of the reduction sauce that we made in the previous video, wink wink. Topped with a sprinkling of chives to fool myself into thinking that I'm eating some vegetables. And finally, a squeeze of lemon to cut through all of that fatty richness. Okay, once more in a position that is completely natural to human beings for food consumption, I will try for you the Rueben Ravioli. It's surprising at first because one tends to associate food that looks like this with like tomato sauce and other sort of pasta-like flavors, but this is like a deli sandwich inside of a pasta, so it's a little surprising, but it is, notwithstanding, one of the best things I've ever made, and I would encourage you all to follow my example and make one of the best things that you've ever made by making one of the best things that I've ever made. Well, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed our journey to the
Center of the legend of the Rueben Ravioli.
Will it change the world as we know it?
Probably not.
Has it changed my life?
Slightly.
I mean, I won't be hungry again for at least a few hours. And as always, do what you love because nobody cares and it doesn't matter.